Production funding of Folks is made possible in part by membership contributions to Friends of Louisiana Public Broadcasting.
There were some inequalities that we existed. Negroes belonged to what I call the 4 dimensions prior to certain decisions. When you went to the theater, you sat upstairs. When you went to ride a boat, you got in the bottom. When you rode a bus, you sat in the back, and when you rode a train, you sat in the front. So we were always placed in a dangerous condition or a dangerous position.
If there's one thing that most black adults in Lafayette Parish have in common, it's their schooling. From 1896 until 1965, all the blacks in the parish who wanted a public education attended one of the 11 colored training schools. In 1926, W.D. Smith established Lafayette's only black public high school, Paul Breaux. During this period in Louisiana history, education as well as most social and civil laws were governed by the separate but equal doctrine which sanctioned strict separation of the races. For nearly 40 years, Paul Breaux High was a center for public education in the black community. But even though the school was part of the parish-wide educational system, facilities and books were lacking and black teachers were underpaid. By 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the separate but equal doctrine, declaring it unconstitutional. 11 years later, the Lafayette Parish Board of Education was ordered to desegregate its schools. The federal court order was seen in Lafayette as the beginning of equal education, but at the same time it threatened the existence of the formerly all-black schools. Shortly before 1970, Paul Breaux High was one of several parish schools ordered closed for desegregation purposes. Part of the desegregation plan was to shut down some of the inferior black schools and disperse the black student population to the surrounding white schools. For many in the black community, the closing of Paul Breaux High was taken lightly. For others, it represented doom for black-oriented education.
The kids are adjusted so well to it. You know, it's not like, hey, she's black or she's white. I think they've adjusted quite a bit. Because I have a positive attitude about it, really, about the busing itself.
Would you want her to go to an all-black school?
Well, if she was happy there, yes. If she was happy and I saw that she was well educated where once she graduated she could make it into college, then I would say yes. But other than that, no.
16-year-old Cassandra Bernard has been bused to school almost as long as she can remember. If she had been in high school 12 years ago, Cassandra would have been walking to Paul Breaux a few blocks from her home. But because desegregation closed the black high school, children in the old Paul Breaux district are forced to finish their schooling in high schools several miles from where they live.
Did you ever think about being bused over there, or that you were part of desegregation in Lafayette?
Not at first, but after a while, you know, it became a hassle waking up in the mornings at around 6 and rushing to the bus stop and stuff and not having time to eat or anything.
Cassandra attends Como High, located about 8 miles from her home in a predominantly white section of the parish just outside the city limits. Most of the black students who attend Como are bused to the school from the Paul Breaux area. The old Paul Breaux High is now a middle school, whose racial makeup is a little more than 50% white. The white kids are bused from the Plantation Elementary School area near Como High. The crisscrossing yellow school buses across the parish seem to symbolize the Lafayette desegregation success story. Almost all of the parish's public schools are now racially mixed. But the success in Lafayette's desegregation story is debated by many in the black community.
I think the stage the case is at now is that, for the most part, people are realizing that we've been fighting for the wrong thing. And we're gearing up to start fighting for the kinds of things that desegregation theoretically was intended to produce in the first place.
Such as?
Well, equal access to the educational process. I think that was a theory initially. And I think what you're finding out now is that it's had the effect of doing just the opposite. And that is, for the vast majority of black kids, it's resulted in almost a total exclusion from the full educational process.
The controversy in the black community over desegregation started when Paul Breaux was closed as a high school in 1970.
I don't know, it was like a slap in the face, really, to see someone just close a high school and whether you graduated from there or not. But it could have been done, but the reason Paul Breaux was closed for, the reason it was closed,
I'm not questioning.
Yeah, it was simply political, so the resources or the reasons that it could have been kept open for educational reasons wasn't even part of the consideration. I venture to say, it was just a mandate that we're going to close this school.
The institution itself was providing an adequate educational opportunity for blacks. And the one thing that a desegregated society has not fostered upon our kids, that those of us who went through the dual system was the closeness and the fellowship between faculty and student. And the black faculties in the separate but equal systems were insistent that you're going to learn in spite. And that in order to compete in this world, you've got to learn and you're going to have to be better. And we destroyed that. Or, let's put it, I'd rather say it was destroyed when we desegregated the system under the present program.
The closing of Paul Breaux High School in 1970 caused a furor in the black community. Many people could not understand why their school was closed. The black students here were sent all over the parish for desegregation. In 1971, the black students who had been sent all over the parish band together to demand that Paul Breaux High School be reopened.
All the black students from Paul Breaux, for the most part, had to attend Northside. And that year, the year of 1971, was a whole new experience for everybody at Northside. And for the most part, the problems that blacks experienced there were problems of unfairness, inequality, lack of representation on the school's faculty. And I think it was the latter part of the school year in 1971 when a black coach by the name of Coach Moore, who was also a former coach at Paul Breaux, was either being dismissed or transferred to another school. And the black students looked upon this as another threat to them having fair representation on the school's faculty.
A student demonstration complete with sit-ins and rallies started a protest that was to last through the end of the school year and on through the summer.
When we did the sit-in, the school, the principal had all the doors in the gymnasium locked and called in some police officers and went in and talked to us and tried to, threaten us to go back to school. And when he began to say things like, well, if you don't get up and move from here, we're going to have you arrested and all. And when we began to see the police officers, we decided to march off the campus.
The school board office was picketed. And as a result, when school opened that following year, in September, for the first time, a black principal was appointed.
The student victory was limited. Paul Breaux was still closed. When the old black high school did reopen, it was used as a temporary elementary school, all 8th grade school, and finally a middle school. Much of the controversy over Paul Breaux had begun to die down until 1974 when the desegregation case was reopened. The federal courts wanted the Lafayette desegregation issue resolved, which meant further breakdown of the one-race schools.
I think we all agreed that that was part of the master plan to make all the schools majority white schools. And I think a number of people drew from this, who was it, Dr. Coleman, you remember the famous Coleman report that schools that had proportionally more, integration seemed to work best when blacks were in a minority.
During 1975, plan after desegregation plan was presented to the Board of Education and federal court. All of them were rejected, including one made up by a special task force of black and white citizens.
I served as chairman of that 444 committee. It was basically a neighborhood school plan. It had, I don't recall the high school. I think we had one plan, maybe an alternate, where Paul Breaux perhaps was a high school. I don't really remember.
This plan, including Paul Breaux as a school, with a particular zone and district as the other two city high schools, was using contiguous lines and zones. By that I mean using man-made lines or thoroughfares. It wasn't something that was drawn around, you know, this little area. It was just a line that would, and of course, it really, if you, I don't know, he'll correct me if I'm wrong, it was almost like it was really going to be similar to really what you would say a neighborhood school type thing, you know, where the zone wouldn't have an island out there in a way, just one complete zone.
Yes, I suppose it was rejected because it was not, at that time, the courts, they were looking at a plan where you'd have somewhat a balance between your black students and your white students in all the schools in the parish. And I think at that point, the plan had maybe, I'm just remembering, maybe 7 or 8 predominantly black schools. It doesn't mean they were 100% or 95%, but even 55% was rejected. So I think this is basically why it was disapproved.
Don't you think that's kind of ironic? Because now with the desegregation and looking at your own figures, most of the schools now are predominantly white, where you'd have maybe a black population of 25%. I think at the most you have like 40%. I'm talking about the middle schools and high schools. So why would they rather have a predominantly white school than a predominantly black school?
Well, of course, the whole intent was to just do away with your black and white schools as such. It was a matter of designing zones to utilize facilities to get the best racial balance that was possible within the system.
The plan that was adopted called for more predominantly black schools to be desegregated or closed. This again caused a furor in the black community.
We planned a one-day boycott of the schools and got all the black children to boycott, which I think was highly effective. But again, if you ask whether that was successful, the bottom line, I would say no. In each occasion, there was some give, but more to pacify, but definitely not enough to deal with the main causes of the discontent, which basically injustices.
The desegregation plan that was implemented in Lafayette is still in force today, with black parents and teachers accepting the plan because they have no other choice. Their main concern now is the effect of desegregation on Lafayette's black children. What black educators and parents are beginning to see worries them.
Integration had not done, and part of the disservice that it had done was that we in Lafayette Parish, and I'm a member of the school board, we have not been able to produce and recruit and appoint a band director of a high school. And we have not been able to produce a head football coach. And we have not been able to produce an assistant superintendent. We have not been able to produce a black clerical person above the 3rd level of administration. We have not been able to produce, except in one instance, athletic director. And, you know, these are the kinds of role models that I think black students need within the educational institution.
Since we've integrated the schools, I have observed that blacks in general have been less competitive in academics. Large number of students, the average students, for different reasons. And I think one of the reasons has been teacher expectation. Whereas at Paul Breaux and some of the black schools that we have known, much more was expected of these children.
But let's look at the majority of the black kids, the potentials that you have there. And they are all in special programs.
Today you're talking about.
Oh, yes, by all means, today. And I get frustrated about it.
The special programs in the Lafayette schools place the students in above average, average, and below average classes. Board of Education statistics indicate the above average classes are predominantly white and the below average classes are predominantly black.
To be honest with you, like a lot of times the white kids are having problems, but the parents will see to it. They'll work with them, they'll get a tutor and see to it that the child makes it some kind of way or another. Where sometimes the black parents don't have time. See, they can't afford to hire someone to tutor their kids. So a lot of times when they're not up to par with their lesson, they just fall back.
You know, school should be fun. Seriously, you know, for any student. You know, I had fun at school. You know, but there's a generation of black students coming through here that have a hostility. And it transcends another person or something. It's a hostility toward education. It's just like a mental death. Now, if you go somewhere and you tolerate it and you don't feel part of something, sooner or later you just feel like, hey, I'm here, and what I can't participate in, you know, what a person don't create, when they don't create, they won't participate.
Admittedly, the desegregation process in Lafayette, like in other parts of the country, has been short of the expectations that the black community had back in the 50s and 40s.
The reality is that it has not been integration, it's been more assimilation. And what has been done has been implemented from primarily a white racist point of view, in which they consider whatever is black is no good and should be eliminated.
I tried out for flags, and the band leader wasn't really fair about it, so I just dropped out of band completely.
Did it hurt your feelings?
Yeah, I cried, because, I mean, I just thought I was qualified for it, and then yet they didn't choose it because, like, okay, the girl that was the head of it had told me that I made it, and then the band leader told me I didn't, and he chose this other girl. And I didn't think it was fair, and I talked to him about it and stuff, and he said, well, it's who's qualified.
Did you think that it had anything to do with, you know, racial overtone, or was it just that you just didn't make it?
I think it did have something to do with racial, because, I mean, I had went to flag camps and stuff, and, you know, I consider myself qualified. I thought about it for a while, then I decided to switch schools, and I talked to my parents about it, and they said, okay.
Why did you come back to Como then?
Oh, because at Catholic schools it was predominantly black, and I didn't get, you know, as many opportunities to do things, and it was nice, but everything was outdated. It wasn't up to date, and they didn't have, like, the typewriters were normal, they weren't electric or anything, you know.
So it was just the facilities?
Yeah.
What about the education? Did you think that was lacking in any way?
Yeah. You know, it was just behind. Everything that we did, I did mainly in the 9th grade, really. So.
Well, one of her teachers commented about that,
What
civics, about her background was very poor in civics. This is why most probably she wasn't doing so well in her history class.
In a few of Cassandra's classes at Como High, she and one or two others are the only black kids in the class.
You feel funny in the class, first of all, because, like, the ones that's doing real good are whites, and they get most of the attention and stuff, but you just have to learn how to fit in.
Do you ever feel like maybe you are a little bit behind the white kids?
Not really, no.
I've known white liberals who have told me that they're frightened by the experiences that their children have had, that their children coming out of the experience have not had a positive experience.
What do you mean? Like fights between blacks?
Fights, right, that tend then to generate more hostility between races. And then, you know, I just give one example. I ride a bicycle and frequently pass by school in the neighborhood that's relatively on balance, I would say, and observe the cluster of children. And it's rare when you see black and white children playing together.
Well, for me, I've come to understand that the problems associated with black folks in the school system and society overall are a lot more complex, a lot more deep than what I perceived them to be back in 1971 when I was involved in the demonstrations at Northside. To think that a black principal or having the white faculty of a school implement rules and regulations in a more fairly and equitable way would solve our problems, to me was naive thinking. What we did back in 1971, I think, was probably a necessary step in the right direction. But to say that it solved whatever problems there is to be solved, I think would be a gross misstatement.
Because there are some cases where you can have one kid living on one side of the street and another kid living on the other side of the street, and they attend school 15 miles away. It just hasn't worked. I think what everybody's saying here is that when we had black schools, black children were being educated. You know, everybody in this room is a product of a black education, a black school. Our kids today are not receiving that same kind of quality education. You know, we have the books now, but they're giving us books for slow learners, you know, or they're tracking us in non-college prep tracks. You know, we're getting the education in the facilities, but, you know, what are we being educated for? And while there are some exceptions to the rule, I think the vast majority, from what I've seen and from talking to and from listening tonight, I learned a lot from listening tonight. It just hasn't worked.
It was really insanity on our part to think that we could send our children to be taught by races and by sending them that they were going to change. For the most part, our children today are being destroyed. They're being sent into a hostile environment that constantly, in very insidious ways, tell them they're no good. They can't learn. And then we wonder why there's so many problems.
I think that we have learned well, too, and that we have to learn that we have to become more astute politicians, that all individuals have to get involved, and that those of us who are in education have to be sort of demanding that we be involved in the decision-making process, and that those of us who are serving in certain capacities or in certain positions must man those positions, and that we must have the support of the entire black community.
I think the road to liberation is a long way off, and we haven't gotten there yet. And there's a lot more work to be done to get there.
And parents, you know, parents got to understand their part too. You know, education is responsible to teach, but not to raise. You can educate a student, but you can't raise a student.
In other words, what we once had or what we once were will perhaps never be again, but there's today or there's another tomorrow as far as from where we can pick ourselves up from now. I think we will always be in a desegregated or an integrated society, but we will have to take and make the best of whatever resources that we have in this particular society, is that we can be represented in the society in which we are presently competing in. Our students can be represented if we have equal representation or equal consideration of our students and all our teachers and all our administrators.
Do sometimes you wish that maybe Paul Breaux, which is right down the street from you, that it was still open?
Yes, very much so. Because she went there and she really enjoyed it. It's a nice school. Yes.
Do you wish you could go to high school in your neighborhood?
Because that way I wouldn't have to get up so early and then run to the bus stop and stuff. You know, I could just walk to school and stuff. It'll be nice, and I could be with all my friends. So So yeah, I wish Paul Breaux would have turn into a high school.
Yeah, because this way all of her friends, I mean, the ones in the neighborhood would all be together.
In all fairness to the Lafayette Parish school system and the Lafayette community, desegregation seems to be working. Out of 38 schools, at least half of them reflect at least a 25% black enrollment. That's about the same as the black community in general. Only 3 schools show a predominantly white enrollment of 90% or more, and only 2 schools show a predominantly black enrollment of 90%. Most of the people around here have accepted desegregation as a way of life. School buses that zigzag the parish in the mornings and afternoons are a constant reminder that law-abiding citizens are following the demands of the courts. It would appear that the black community got what it wanted, a desegregated school system. But the sacrifices by the black community for equal education have been great. Out of 11 black schools before desegregation, only 5 of them remain standing. There isn't a predominantly black high school anymore, and busing for desegregation purposes is still being carried largely by the black community. Many blacks in the neighborhood say that the sacrifices were worth the opportunities black students now have. Others say too much was lost. The school board maintains that it came up with the best desegregation plan that it could work with. As we said, desegregation seems to be working, and most people seem to have accepted it. But in the future, it will be interesting to note as Lafayette grows, and if a new high school is needed to be built, which neighborhood the new high school will be built in.
Production funding of Folks is made possible in part by membership contributions to Friends of Louisiana Public Broadcasting.